Hello, my name is Mark Trueman. This is the Brutal Truth of Trueman. Today I want to talk to you about the vaccine, okay? And actually not really about the vaccine, but actually about vaccine passports, or at least the conversation we're having surrounding vaccine passports, and how possibly businesses may decide after we get rid of this nasty mask protocol that basically they'll make it so that unless you have a vaccine passport, which is issued by the provincial government, I guess in this case, in Ontario, will actually have the right, business will actually want to check your ID at the door like it's a club. But let's just talk about something that rules that are going to fundamentally change your society, or seemingly change your society in the coming days. Questions are going to be asked, of course. Is this legal? Mandatory? Is mandatory actually legal? Well, let's talk about that. So, for example, when you go and you see the words mandatory, mandatory does not mean that it actually always falls underneath the law. It just simply means that that business or that person or that organization wishes to recommend strongly, and that's why they use mandatory, that you follow the guidelines, basically. There is usually no legal basis as to refuse access. Okay? So let's talk about this from the business perspective. For example, there's several things actually that are at play here. When a business actually recommends that it's mandatory, it does not mean that it falls underneath a legal basis. Now, of course, there's been bylaws apparently for the mask wearing, and what's most interesting about that is that you can actually, you don't have to actually provide proof of a medical exemption. And the same thing is going to be true, and it's going to be very difficult for businesses to enforce, is that businesses will make it mandatory, but you don't actually have to show or answer that question about your medical history. That actually falls underneath the fact that you have a right to your medical privacy. Also, that could also fall underneath disability rights. Now, I can tell you right now, if you're a business and you're going to put fully vaccinated people only, then I think there's actually going to be quite a number of lawsuits, cases, and human rights cases of that matter that are going to actually come forward towards the businesses who actually do that. Now, I'm not saying this is a threat. I'm just telling you this is information's sake. Second of all, for example, you have your workplace. And your workplace basically is going to say, well, yeah, we want everyone to be vaccinated, okay? So we're going to make it mandatory. Again, that word mandatory. Well, let me tell you, first of all, that is actually right now, there is no law on the books that says your employer can force you to take any medical procedure. Like, for example, if your employer has a hearing test, or if your employer has chest x-rays that it does periodically, you can refuse. You can actually opt out and actually sign a form and say, I do not wish to have that procedure done on me. In fact, right now in Ontario, you cannot actually drug test anybody for a job. So the thing is, just like the old adage, you have a right to refuse unsafe work. Well, you have a right to refuse. You can actually say to your employer, no, I am not taking the vaccine. I am simply just going to decide for myself, because that's the best decision for myself, to not take the vaccine. And thirdly, let's look at let's look at your personal life. Of course, everything is opening up. You know, we're going to have friends and family, and we're going to possibly go back to pool parties. We're going to go back to socializing with our neighbors. We're going to go back to all these things that apparently we've missed out for a year and a half. And by the way, I've been doing them all along. I've been perfectly fine. There's no issue. There is no issue with actually, greeting your neighbors in the street. By the way, I have no idea why people are wearing masks outside. Just a question. Sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent, but anyways. So are your friends actually going to have these conversations? Like, if you're not going to get vaccinated, you're not invited to my party? Like, really? Is this grade 2 or 3 a game of cooties? You didn't get your cootie shot? So that's the question, of course, facing us in our personal lives. Are our friends are going to excommunicate you from your social group just simply because you're not one of the cool kids? You didn't do the drugs. What were we saying in the 1990s? Say no to drugs. We had programs in preschool. We had programs in grade school. We had programs in high school, all talking about say no to the drugs. Well, apparently it's high time. 2021 is say yes to the drugs. Say yes to the jab. Say yes to the vaccine. Say yes to basically an untested vaccine that actually has not been FDA approved or even been approved properly throughout the stages of medical testing. So the brutal truth is, mandatory does not make it legal. It is highly recommended, it is strongly recommended, of course, by that organization or business or workplace, but it does not make it legal. There is no law on the books that states that you have to get your vaccine to access that business, to access your personal life, or to access making an income. And that's the brutal truth.